Welcome, Kelsey. I'm so happy you're here. I know we've had to reschedule this a couple times and partly my fault, but I was telling you right before we hopped on to record that I'm just so excited to chat with you for like the next 45 minutes to an hour. You're just so much fun to talk to. You have so many great ideas. You're such a great person to lean on for so many different things. But before we even get into all the good stuff, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience and tell everybody the awesomeness of who you are?
I love it. Well, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to chat. And I love and adore you. I'm a big believer in your work and what you do. So this is really I feel like a treat for me in my week of scheduling. So I'm excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I am Kelsey Murphy. I am a coach. I help people to start and build and grow their coaching or consulting businesses. I'm really good at helping people figure out what is kind of their sweet spot, what is the thing that makes them different, that makes them unique. And then I help them take that, really clean up that messaging, make it real clear, and put it into a offer or a business or a site in some sort of format that people can purchase and people can then be impacted by their gifts. And I tend to work with these big-hearted, empathetic humans that have these gifts and skill sets. They're these treasure trove of humans, I feel like, that kind of wear their hearts on their sleeves. They love deep, meaningful conversations. But figuring out how to kind of package that and sell it, or package that and offer it in a way where it's an exchange of their gifts for a significant amount of money is really hard for them. That's just not a skill set they have cultivated and developed yet. And there's a big yet there because it's not something I think that really comes naturally to a lot of us. It didn't come naturally to me. Us coaches, us humans that like to have these very, deep, meaningful, empathetic conversations, that's where we spend all our time. That's where we spend all our effort, our energy. So it shouldn't come naturally to be able to figure out how to monetize that. So I teach people how to do that. And I love it. And now that I do it, I nerd out on this like crazy. It makes me feel so excited helping people with it. And so my coaching background now that has transitioned into how to help people make money in that, that new world for me in the last, decade has been really neat.
Yeah, well, you're amazing at it. I was talking to my husband about this one day, and we were saying, when you see somebody who does something really well, they make it look really easy, it almost feels and that's what it's like when I watch you coach people, or when you've coached me for so long in terms of, I remember coming to you saying, I'm a writer. I write about parenting. I've never done consults. I'm getting requests to start doing some things. And what does that look like? And where do I even begin? And it was like learning a whole new language, from understanding how to connect with a client, learning how to market yourself, which is something that I had never done. I had been on social media for 3 minutes. So I wasn't even really understanding the entire idea of building an audience. But what I loved about you too is that I think even early on you had said you don't need to be somebody that's tethered to social media all the time to grow an audience. And that isn't really the only way that we can gain a following or gain people who come to us and pay for our services. So I thought that was so important too. A lot of the audience is moms of the podcast. And I know when I talk to so many moms, even though I'm coaching them about parenting things, a lot of times it'll come up I really just want to do this thing for myself, but I guess when my kids get older, I'll do it. Or when I have time, or there's always this but, or only if. And that's why I kind of wanted you on. So why don't you tell everyone that, about your beautiful girls and the fact that you do all of this and balance, motherhood. And there isn't a perfect way of doing it, but I think you set such a really great example for so many.
Oh man, well, I mean, I feel like that's very kind coming from you, considering the fact that you see me in my highs and lows and challenging myself and my views on motherhood and my views on myself and what that means from a scheduling standpoint and a business standpoint, an individual standpoint. But yeah, I have 3 little girls, and I love them, and they're so spirited. They're the most spirited children I ever thought I would get. Um, they're very similar to me, like very just big balls of love and energy and emotions. And I grew up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and we lived in a small town. And so I just always envisioned that I would be a stay-at-home mom. Like that was a dream. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be home with my kids. And then I graduated college and I went and I got like a fun advertising job in San Francisco, but it was just all under the assumption that like I'm going to have this fun job until I get married, and then when I get married, I'm going to settle down, I'm going to stay at home. Like
Yeah.
that's my course. Like that's the dream, right? And then I started to really like my job in advertising. And it wasn't advertising specifically that I loved. It was just having this really fun job where I was contributing, I was doing exciting things. I just felt lit up in certain areas, right? And I was like, oh man, this is a little bit more fun than I thought,
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened then as I started to grow as a person, as I started to find all these different sparks and loves and little mini gifts that I had and many things that lit me up. And so then when I did get together with my husband and we started to envision what our life would be like together, I had to really challenge this idea of being a stay-at-home mom because it was still
Mm-hmm.
there. That dream had been in me for almost 30 years. And so now that I found my person, we were talking about, having kids and stuff. And I was like in my mind being like, oh, so you're just going to go be a stay-at-home mom. And my whole body was like, oh no, I kind of want both. Like, what
Yeah.
am I going to do? Right. Because then I started looking around in the advertising world and being like, who kind of has both, right? Who has this job where they feel really proud of themselves, they're successful, they're doing really well, but they're also at every single field trip. They're at drop off and pick up. They're there for every soccer practice and they love it. It's not stressful. It's fun. Like they
Mm-hmm.
get to go hang out. And I was like crickets. I like didn't see anyone. Right. And I was just like, oh, I don't see anyone in the world that I'm in that's able to do that. It was always like a stressful run out the door, try to get to practice, fielding phone calls, having to miss things. It just did not seem enjoyable. And I did like take some of those women out to lunch and ask them, and they were like, no, 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 you have to pick and choose. There's going to be a season for this and then a season for that. And I just like refused to like accept that. I was just like, I think there's other ways, and I'm determined to find them. And so I went on a search to find other people that were doing other kinds of jobs where they could do both. And this was a while ago. I feel like it's much more prevalent now to see women
Yeah.
trying to do both. Seeing women do both well, and
Mm-hmm.
not be stressed out and find their own flow and rhythm or quote unquote balance, I think is maybe a little bit more difficult. But people are doing it much more now. Women are doing it much more now than they were back then. But it's kind of when I stumbled into coaching and online business. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of women that have all the freedom and flexibility. They're working it around what's important to them in their life. And sometimes that's travel if they're kind of young and don't have a lot of children, or maybe they're older and their children are, they're kind of empty nesters. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, like I knew that was going to be like hunkering down at home for a season of life, just being in the carpool lane, just being around and there for my kids, like physically. That's really what was important to me. And so then I developed this business, and through trial and error, and every season changes, but I'm really clear on like, these are the days and the moments that I work and these are not. And I started in really strong with like, I'm only working 3 days a week. I'm shutting
Mm-hmm.
it off by 2 p.m. Like, this is it. The other days I'm just fully with my kids. And I remember when I shortened up that work scope and told myself I was going to be able to achieve all the things I wanted to in that tiny time frame. Like like it's that law of being able to get more done in a shorter time period,
Yeah.
versus everything expanding just if you have more time. And so I was able to do it. I was able to build this beautiful coaching business. First, it was one-on-one. Then I scaled it, was able to build it into groups and then do some workshops. And now there are these online programs that are passive. Like, I was able to build this business in these tiny little pockets. And I wouldn't say it wasn't stressful, but I look back now, my oldest Ken is 7. So I look back on the last 7 years, like, of building the business since I had kids. And there's not a single year that I look back and say, oh man, I wish I would have worked less. There's not a single year that I can look back and say that. Every single year I look back and I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had that schedule. Like, I can't, like, I feel so lucky and so grateful. And I have these memories of just, Wednesday afternoons walking around farmers market while also having a top ranked podcast, while also hitting, like, this incredible financial milestone, while also being on stages and speaking across the country, like, still having those things while also, like, I'm the room mom for Kenneth's thing. I'm the soccer coach. Like, I'm the Girl Scout troop leader. Like, I still get to do all the things that, like, I thought I would do as a stay-at-home mom, while also still watching the business be what I consider successful, So it's never perfect. And like I was saying, every season changes. And this because I'm up in your boxer, like, being like, okay, now I've got 3 kids. Like, now I've got a newborn. Now I've got a 3-year-old that keeps me up every single night. Now I have a child that has asthma and is in the hospital. There are all these different variables and things that happen that change the, like, how much time I can work, like, what my schedule looks like. And it's been so helpful for me to have people like you and to kind of come back to the roots of, like, what are the most important things to you? Like, not what do you think you should be doing? What, like, is your past conditioning tell you should be doing? What did your mom do so you think that is quote unquote the right thing? Like, what brings you alive? What makes you feel really happy in this season right now? Like, because you could be in postpartum, like, sometimes I was pregnant, like, all these different, in this season right now, what feels really good for you? And being able to go back to that and reflect and know that it's constantly moving has been so helpful. It's a practice I do now every single week. Like, every single week when I look at the week and I have all these, like, ideas of what it should be or what I should get done or how much time I should spend with the kids, I'm like, what feels really good? What if you did it a little bit differently? What if you stopped with the expectations and you built it in a way that feels really dreamy to you? Like, what would that look like? And I'm always surprised by how different that is versus what I would have just sat down and productively marked out on my calendar. Because it's like my brain goes into the place of, this is what it should look like, versus like, no, hold on, let's pause and then dream up something else for the week. And then that for me has been so helpful in, like, building the business and being home with the kids,
Yeah, my gosh, I love that so much because there's so much to unpack there. And I think one of the sort of kernels that I heard you say, and I think so many busy moms will resonate with this, is just the idea that it didn't happen overnight. You sort of decided moment to moment, season to season, what was going to be priority. How were you going to kind of inch your way toward that? It didn't have to feel like this big, overwhelming kind of task that just feels impossible. So we feel defeated and we throw in the towel. And now, 7 years later, it's some of that's in your rearview mirror. You're still growing, but you're looking back and you're going, wow, this is where it started and this is how it grew. And then it grew a little more. And then this happened and then I scaled it. And so I think just sometimes saying yes to that first inkling, like, maybe I should try something, or I've never considered an online business, or I've never considered, even if it's to supplement an income, or maybe you just are in a position where you have to stay home and you're just wondering, like, I wonder if there are some creative outlets out there that I could showcase, that I could monetize as well. So there is so much in that space that I just think people don't realize it. And then I was going to ask you, we were talking about the girls and, like, that you're looking back and you're seeing all these things. What would you say to somebody who's like maybe sitting on an idea, like, I wonder if I could teach people how to do A, or I'm really good at helping people work through certain types of problems, or maybe it's transitions in their lives, or, different things like that. Should I think about coaching, or is there some type of online business that I could be considering? What would you say to somebody who feels like it might just be the impossible task?
Ooh, I love that. That's a juicy one. So when those things come up for people, because I'm in a circle of women who are just full of talents, right? Like just like my friends, my neighbors, people in the PTA group, like people that aren't in online businesses or entrepreneurs, like just full of cool talents and things. I think that it's less about believing that you have a talent or a skill to like monetize, because I think if we all pushed ourselves hard enough, we'd be like, yeah, like I could find something, sure, like yeah, like I can sew bow ties over here, right? Or like yeah, like, but the idea of what it might take for me to build that business, I think for moms and women can feel overwhelming because we already have so much of a heavy load on our shoulders. Like we are such the CEOs of the household with so many like silent responsibilities, like the amount that Colin and I sit down and talk about, like, so I feel overwhelmed because I am planning, like signing the kids up for all their extracurriculars, right? But it's not just signing them up. It's doing the mental gymnastics of, okay, who's going to get them where? How early would I have to leave? How, like everything from does this fit in with one kid's schedule to the next kid's schedule? And if we do this, what are we going to do about that vacation? And how much are we leaving on the table? And, like there's so much mental gymnastics to just sign them up for one single class, right? And nowadays you're signing your kids up for 17 classes, right? Like 17 gymnastics, Girl Scouts, soccer, all the things, right? So women, we have this load, this heavy load. So the idea of starting something on the side or building something, I think for us, we have a fear that it's just going to add to the load, that it's just going to be way more work. It's going to be overwhelming. And then we're going to be more stressed. And then it's going to take us away from our kids. And like, why? Like, I'm already so exhausted. Right. So, and I know for me, like I have a very successful business and I still think that like every time I have a project coming up or an email I have to write or a podcast to record, that is one of the first thoughts that pops into my head. It's almost like the fight or flight. It's protecting me. It's like thinks it's protecting me, right? By like, don't worry, I'm not going to let you get overwhelmed. I'm not going to let you get underwater. So I'm going to protect you by, making you like fear that option over there.
Yeah.
When the reality is when I do a podcast, when I write a simple email and I send it out and I get one reply, literally one reply that says like, that really resonated with me. I can't even tell you the connection I feel in the universe, in the world, when I connect with people in that way. When someone has a, like, you saw me, I saw you, this moment. And not only that, but I love writing. I love talking to people and having conversations on podcasts. Like those kinds of things do truly light me up, right? And so when I have those thoughts that this is overwhelming, this is going to be too much, right? I have a couple of things that I do to make sure I can shift out of that place faster than I used to. Because what used to happen is I would feel that thought and then I'd just stay stuck. And I wouldn't move forward. I wouldn't go after anything. I wouldn't explore the next step. And then I would be bummed about myself. I'd secretly feel less confident. I'd secretly feel less interesting. I'd secretly have all these little insecurities where when I started to say yes to things and not like I'm going to jump off a cliff and like quit all my job and leave my children for a year and start a business. Like, no, when I just started to say yes to a class or yes to one little project or yes to writing one little article or yes to these small things, I would see what would happen inside me, the light, how much it would excite me, how much it would show me like my old self, the little sparks that I have as an individual Kelsey, not as a
Mhm.
mom, right? And those things started to add up time and time and time again. So I started to realize, like, if you do say yes, if you do go after this thing, you're going to feel so proud of yourself, so much more confident, so much more excited about life. You will have more energy, and all of that ripple effects into my children and my partnership. Every single thing. I have more
Mhm.
energy with my kids and my partner. I have more excitement with them. I'm more confident with them and in my relationships. It all ripple effects, right? So for me, I really had to look at, what do you need to do to shift out of that place of immediately assuming this is going to be a lot of work, it's going to be overwhelmed, I'm not going to have time for my kids, right? Like, how can I shift out of that place faster? And so for me, I would have little tools, and they're going to be different tools for everybody, right? So I would always call this my, like, a little emergency pack, or my digital
Mhm.
emergency pack. And I'd have like a list of a couple things, like some things were quotes, some things were songs, some things were quick, like 3-minute TED Talks that would like
Mhm.
shift me out of that place and get
Yeah.
me back into that courageous place of recognizing you can do this, you can build this. And in the very, very beginning, and if someone is in the very beginning stages of this, like they're sitting there and they're like, I have an idea, but I resonate that, Kelsey. I think that like it just is going to be overwhelming. I don't know that moms can actually do it. I would say start with trying to have that belief that you can do it because others have done it as well.
Mhm.
So go out there and find people that are doing it in a way you want to do it. Like, go look for people that have a business but also are super present with their kids, and you're watching them, like with that duality, you're watching them live in both of those worlds and you're seeing it happen in real life. And then I would say, instead of just watching them on Instagram, get into their world. Like, can you get on
Mhm.
their email list? Can you go to one of their events? Can you get to know if they're the real deal? Like, go look for some skeletons in that closet. Like, that's what I do when I want to know, is someone really doing both? Are they a really good human and incredibly successful? Like, I'm going to get to know them. I'm going to go into their world and see if I can figure out, like, if this is real or not. Because if it's real, holy cow, I want to learn from this person.
Mhm.
I want to do it like they're doing it. I've just found a silent mentor. Like, I've just found someone that I'm going to follow. And so because I did that and I saw so many do it, so many people do it, I knew I had the belief that I could do it as well. So whenever I second guess myself, have a list of people, just a list of names that I'm like, here are 7 people that are doing it incredibly well as a mom, as a human, with content that you think makes the world a better place, and incredibly financially successful. Look at these people. And when I see their names and I'm like, yes, you're right. I forgot. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Okay, let's keep going. Like, so it's like, find that thing that's holding you back, that mindset piece, and then can we shift it a little bit faster?
I love that so much. It makes me think of I don't know if do you do, it's called To Be Magnetic. Her name is Lacey Phillips, but
Mm-mm.
it's like a manifestation type of a, I think they do like different webinars. It's an app, but it's more than that. It's by far like one of my favorite things. But anyways, it's really involved. You do these meditations. It takes you through a lot of processes. It isn't just like sitting and dreaming up like a vision board or something like that. But she calls it expanders. So they do a whole thing on if there's something that you're kind of having an inkling towards, or you're thinking like, that's really cool. I wonder, are there people who do that almost exactly like what you're describing? They go and they find, you basically give the same assignment you just described and you call them expanders, because instead of feeling envious or like, shoot, that person's already doing it, I guess it's not for me, it's instead your envy turns to sort of your direction of where you want to go. And now you're looking at that person and you're saying like, oh, they're my expander. They're the person showing me that I too have that expansion inside of me. It is possible. It is there for me. So that's been a really interesting process for me. You, for me, are an expander for sure. Like when I first started and I was like I'm like coaching and I don't really know. And I remember I used to turn people down when they'd be like, do you do parenting consults? I'm like, nope, I just write. And you kind of, said to me, like, you should think about it. Like, there's a lot of value to it. And you're saying no for reasons that are taking something away from that person. You could really be helping them. And so I saw you, and I saw you do it in a way that was incredibly honorable, and you were just so, a person of your word. So it felt really good to kind of watch you and to continue to watch you grow and do all these things. One of the things you've taught me that, and I agree with you, and I'm going to jump back to something you just said, was the idea of like the ripple effect of it. Like when I started to do this, one of the questions I get asked the most is like, how do you have time? Because I work full time and I do this usually either in the evenings or weekends, or, I'm just kind of maneuvering through it. And I always say, like, it's amazing when you really want to do something, how quickly you realize you do have the time. Like that paradox thinking of like, oh, I don't have time for that. We always kind of tell ourselves that. But if you really sit with that and look at it and examine it, you can start to look under the surface and see there's likely something under there that's stopping you. And that idea of like, I just don't have time seems to be the very acceptable answer. And what I learned from you is you are so good at your setting your boundaries, holding your boundaries with your time. You're very intentional with how you use your time. And I think that is such a hard thing to learn. I've learned it through you and with you. But that is part of it, right? Like I'm able to feel so excited while I'm recording this podcast. Then this evening, I'll do something with my daughter, and that's going to be my time with her where I'm not even thinking about other things. And then tomorrow morning, I'll do some writing, and that's going to be very intentional. So I love that idea. How did you, are you like an innately good setting boundaries person, or did you learn to do that over time? Like, how did you come to this place where you were like, here is how I'm going to make my time work for me, rather than feeling like I'm the one chasing the clock all the time?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say like I was ever good at setting boundaries. I think, I'm thinking back to my corporate days where, I was just run ragged saying yes to everything, right? Like there was a certain point I said yes to like 4 different clients in different time zones. Like I was working with Nintendo out on the West Coast and in Japan. I was working with Elizabeth Arden, and they were doing stuff in Paris and in New York. I remember I was fielding phone calls like 24/7. There was zero boundaries happening there, right? Yeah. But I think that when I really cut loose from that, and Colin and I, my husband, like when we quit our jobs, we were both like, we have to quit because we have these golden handcuffs and I don't know what I want to do next. And I keep waiting to quit till I know what I want to do next. But I just don't know. And that journey of figuring out what is quote unquote next for me is exactly that. It's a journey, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to be, oh, I know I'm going to go from this to this, because I was going from a corporate job to something that I wanted to build. And like that, that was just going to take a while. I didn't really understand that at the time, right? But I see that now. So when we both quit our jobs and we bought these one-way tickets out to Australia, and we went and traveled for like 6 months, and it was so fun. And that's when like I really got into coaching, and I started interviewing all these different coaches around the world. Like I remember sitting in Turkey and in Bulgaria and Dublin and all these places, sitting down with different like life coaches being like, okay, are you legit? Like, I need to know, like, what's your background? Cause like, that was my biggest thing with coaching. It was so woo woo. And I didn't want to get swept up in this, like, non-regulated industry. And I was like, talk to me, like, how are you doing this? How are you substantiating this? Like, what does it look like in your world? And it was so helpful to do that from a global perspective. Right. But I was learning from all these people. And then when I started to get into coaching, I just felt like I was no longer looking for something that just was exciting for me in the moment. I was looking for something that was exciting for me for the new world I wanted to build for myself. Like I really started looking at it as like a long-term, long game situation. And the new world that I wanted to live in was really clear on prioritizing my time with Colin and space for kids. And
Mm-hmm.
those were just, and I'm not saying that's right or that's what everyone should do. Those were just literally the two things I was most excited about in my life. And it's like, if you're really excited about something, like you should lean into that. Like that excitement is in your body for a reason, right? And I was loving my time with Colin, like so happy. And I was loving the idea of being home for my kids. And so, how can I build that like long term future? And I just knew with those rooted intentions and values and dreams, like I had to be protective of my time. I had to be really protective. And what was interesting when we came back from Europe, I had started my coaching business, and the whole first year of my coaching business, I had to supplement it with something, right? It was not making the kind of money I was making in advertising at all. So I supplemented it with a freelance job in advertising for like 3 months. It was like a little 3-month gig, and it would give me enough to supplement for the year of what I needed to make. And I remember I was very clear on my boundaries in that advertising job. I'm like, I'm not going to go back to the way I was before, where like advertising is very much a work hard, play hard. Like everyone is at the office till 9 p.m., ordering beers, just like hanging out and working. And I'm like, and I had no kids at the time, and it was just Colin and I, but I was like, I'm going to start right now being really clear. I'm always done at 4. Like I stop working at 4. That's going to be my thing. And I will tell you, it was one of the hardest things I have ever done. And I got a lot of side eye for it, and people were frustrated. And I realized in that kind of push pull moment, because it wasn't my full time job, but I was committed for 3 months, being like, yeah, like if these boundaries are important to you, Kelsey, and this time frame is important to you, you probably cannot go work for a company. Like you just can't. You're going to have to build something where you are the boss, like because this just isn't cultivated in the States, at least, to be able to leave at that kind of an hour, or to not work overcompensate, or work these crazy weekends or nights, or overdo it. So I had that moment where I was like, you better hustle and build your business, Kelsey, because otherwise like you're gonna get side eye. It's not gonna feel good. Leaving at 4 is incredibly difficult, and that culture just wasn't cultivated, right? So I knew that I was going to have to build something for myself. And when I built that thing for myself, I built it with the idea of always being there for drop off and pickup, only working 3 days, most of the time having Mondays and Fridays for myself. Like that was the goal. So I built it in that framework first. And then, it was easier to stay within that framework or tiptoe outside of it for fun, for projects I was really excited about or different opportunities. But I knew that was the framework I needed to build the business in from the get-go. And so at that point, then the boundaries started to become clear, and I started to get a lot better at them. And now, as you know, my boundaries are incredibly clear. Like I'm like, I only do calls on 1 day a week. I want the freedom every other day of the week to do whatever I need to. I also have to do that because I have young kids. So my kids are getting called in sick all the time. Like you can't go through a winter with young children without everyone being sick at least once a week, right? So it's like I knew I really could only have 1 day that was like, this is my 1 day for calls. Other days, if I need to work around my schedule or I need to just sit home and snuggle, I can. So I know there's only 1 day a week where I have to be really thoughtful about what happens. And then Colin knows, my husband knows, and my mom who's out of town but can come in. There's only 1 day a week where I would need some serious support if I had a sick kid, right? So, but I will tell you, I look forward to when my kids are a little bit older and I can spread those calls out and like play around with them and have a little bit more freedom. But right now they're all on 1 day. I love that day. Like I love talking with people and coaching on that day. But the boundaries that I have to create in this season are very specific. And I can tell, even with McKenna now being in school age, that like, oh, those boundaries are going to loosen up from a kid perspective. But now my boundaries are getting tighter from like a what does Kelsey need perspective, because I'm getting a little more freedom, right? So it's like I love playing pickleball right now. So now I've got 1 day a week where I block 9 to 12, and I'm like, It's blocked on my calendar. My assistant knows. I'm like, I am playing pickleball with the 80-year-olds on this day from 9 to 12. And so it's like my boundaries, I've taught myself to get a little bit more specific with those boundaries, and the gift that it like that has given to myself, I don't even realize it till now. Like I was just playing pickleball yesterday, and someone was like, "Oh, do you not work?" One of the old guys there, like who I love, he was like, "Do you not work?" I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 I work." But I'm like, I've blocked this time. It makes me so happy. It makes me a better mom. I freaking love it. And I had two other friends that had come, and they were there, but they were fielding phone calls the whole time they were there. And I just had this moment of not like sadness for them because they were stoked to be there, but also there was a little bit extra level of stress. And I was like, man, I'm really proud of myself for being like, this is my moment to just be doing this and be really intentional and engaged and talk with the people that are here in the present moment with me. And then I'll go be stressed about work after this, like it's not like I don't get stressed about work, but like I try to be really intentional with my blocks of time.
You so are. I love that so much. And I think it's really good advice. If you're a mom or not a mom, it doesn't really matter. Even for men, it's really important that we can give ourselves that space to say, like, this chunk of time is for this, and that's what I'm going to be present with, and that's what I'm going to really devote my time to. And also what you're mentioning too is like choosing things that fill your cup, right? That fill you up. So often we're like, I have to do for everybody else, and that by the time I'm even taking into account my own considerations, there's really not a lot left in the tank. So I'm not really that interested in like exploring any of those ideas. So what I love about what you've created, I mean, your life is so beautiful, but it just you've really had to work at that is the point, right? Like you've had to sort of look at situations that you didn't like and work schedules that weren't conducive with what you wanted. So it really does take some honest conversations with yourself more than anything to really be able to go, okay, what do I really need right now? There's, hopefully hustle culture is moving away, or we're steering ourselves away from it. But I know a lot of moms that during COVID, particularly like those couple of years when things would be open and then closed, and daycares were open and then, oops, this classroom shut down for 2 weeks because of quarantines and whatnot. So, I know of a lot of women of young children that had to leave their jobs and walked away from their careers because someone had to. And, unfortunately, statistically speaking, that winds up being more women than it ever is men. So there were so many young mothers who I know as friends and whatnot, and through circles of people that I work with, that ended up leaving their jobs. And they are in this kind of wide open space right now, kind of blank canvas of going like, okay, I guess I was away from that for a minute, and now I realize I don't want to go back to it. I think that's some of it too. It was like a forceful moment of teaching you how to be intentional. So I love people like you and the work that you're doing, because you give people a space to go, well, I wonder if I could consider trying this or doing this. I mean, when I first came to you, I said, I don't know that I want to coach, but I know I've got to learn how to do something just to kind of fill my cup and just for myself. And you were like, I've got you. And, through that time together, I consider you a very dear friend now, but even in those early days, you really kind of took me under your wing, and you're like, what do you love? What do you want to spend your time on? Is that really what you want to do? Is that really how you want to? And I was like, oh, like really good, hard questions that I had to think about. And so how did you kind of, and maybe it's still something you grapple with, but a lot of women I work with, we kind of always feel governed by like the shoulds, have tos, and supposed tos, I call them. Like, and so does that still kind of rear its ugly head? I mean, you're a mom of 3 really busy girls, right? You guys live a really kind of full life with a lot of activities. Do you still find yourself like in those spaces where like those shoulds and supposed tos and have tos can kind of rear their ugly head?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. And it's probably different for everybody. I'm happy to
Yeah.
share what those look like for me. But I feel like based off your personality, like, we're all dealing with our own version of should, have to, or like for me, like the guilt is such an
Guilt.
interesting, it's so interesting to feel like what my version of mom guilt is, right? Everyone has their
Yeah.
own version of mom guilt. But mine's almost like a preemptive mom guilt, right? Like when I get excited about a project, or like, I want to join a mastermind and go away for 2 days, and go somewhere and work on my business. And I have 3 young children, and I will say I have like the most supportive, engaged, involved partner ever, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
have tons of support. And yet, I still preemptively am like a bad mom, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
preemptively worried about my kids. I'm preemptively assuming that, something bad is going to happen, or I'm going to miss something important. And it's so funny because that's just where my natural brain goes. And I think, like you're saying, there's something programmed in us that we assume that responsibility, and we assume that that is what we are built and meant for, and that's our job. And it's not that it's not our job, and it's not that we're not built for it, but it's so funny that I don't assume like the positive side. I don't
Yeah.
assume that if I go away for 2 days, what beautiful memories they're going to get to make with their dad or with their Grammy, or what a beautiful experience they're going to have. And then that's going to make them more resilient because they feel more loved by more people, and they have more of a support system, right? And I'm going to feel full because I just got 2 nights away in a hotel and met new people and reminded myself I can be social and I can blow
Mm-hmm.
dry my hair, like
Mm-hmm.
there are all of these like beautiful things that can come from it. And I have probably done it enough now, and I'm on kid 3 to know I do know that's the end result. So I have an advantage of knowing that is the end result. However, like I have a trip coming up in like 3 weeks. It's a 2 day trip to Miami, and I'm like, how can I leave at the last possible second and get back as early as possible? And it's so funny because it's like, Kelsey, don't wake up at 4 a.m. Like, it's not going to matter if you take that later flight
Yes.
to your children, but it will to you because you're a tired, exhausted mom who never gets away like this. So take the later flight, have a cup of coffee, relax, right? Like, but it's funny because that's definitely not the go to. So I have to stop and like take a moment and reflect on, the past experiences I've had, or, moments that I've seen them have with their dad or with Grammy or with Nana, and these beautiful like memories they have, and these pictures. And I
Yeah.
come home and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and even if there's tears, and there probably will
Yeah.
be, right? They'll be sad, they'll miss mom at the end of the night. Like, I look, and I'm teaching them that like you can still miss mom and have beautiful memories, and she's back, right? Like, look
Yes.
at what you just were able to get through, the resiliency that it builds for them, right? So for me, the and I'm talking a lot about motherhood because for me that's where it rears its head the most, is
Yes, I agree.
motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's like I have less doubt in myself being able to figure out how to be successful in a business because I know that I'll figure it out somehow. I'll hunker it down, I'll find some mentors, I'll pay for a class, I'll Google it like crazy. Like, I can figure those things out. I have enough confidence in myself as an individual to do that, but like do that and be a good mom? Well, I don't know about
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, I'm only in year 7 of being a mom. I'm like a rookie, like, so I'm still learning so much about motherhood and about myself going through motherhood, of like, wow, Kelsey, that's the first place your brain went. That's so interesting. Like, I wonder
Yeah.
why. Why do you immediately feel guilt and shame and assume that you're doing something selfish? Like, that's so interesting that that's the first place your brain went. Because if you look at it logically, or you look at it from this other perspective, look at this other side, like, how does that make you feel? Like, and I've probably done that exercise so many times now, and enough where I have belief in it. I'm able to kind of get through it. But kind of like we were talking about with seasons, I'm also very well aware that each season changes and is a new unknown and a new variable, right? Like, as my daughters, I'm sure, get into being teenagers, and we start to deal with
Mm-hmm.
new activities and new things, there will be a new feeling that comes up for me, and a new like this assumption that I need to be there in these certain moments, instead of taking a step back and saying, where do you really need to be there for this specific child and for you in this moment of life, right? And where does can your husband be there? And what is going on in all of your lives? Instead of just being like, this is my assumed role as a mom, need to be there 100%. It's like, well, let's take a step back. Like, let's look at the situation. What feels really good right now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is true. It's like as mothers, and I certainly mom guilt is one of those things that we all experience. And I love the way, you've kind of found your process and way of working through it. A lot of times I'll tell a mom, like, and I certainly have felt mom guilt multiple times in my life and still do, but I'll tell a mom, instead of immediately going like, no, I shouldn't feel guilty. We almost like condemn ourselves for then having the mom guilt. It's like we experience the mom guilt, then we're in trouble for having mom guilt. And so I'll say, instead of doing it that, why don't we just sit with it and go like, okay, name it. I feel guilty. I feel really bad inside. I feel super bad about this thing that just happened. Okay, I feel guilty because, like, fill in that blank and dig there, go a little deeper. And usually what we start to find is like we've subscribed to some idea or ideal of what it is to be a good mom. And for everybody, to your point, that is different, right? It depends on how you were parented. It depends on your societal kind of implications. Like, what is it that you took away culturally in terms of being a good mom? Do you compare yourself to others? Is it, influenced by what others think? Like, what is it that you're kind of telling yourself? And then at the end of that, you want to really ask yourself, is it true? Like, if you're 5 minutes late to the soccer game, are you a bad mom? No, you are not, right? So it's like the idea that we're going to sit and stew over all these little things and feel so guilty about it. But the benefit of it is, if you can do that exercise or lean into it instead of condemning yourself for feeling guilty, you can usually conjure up what's under there, what's doing that. And the second you spot it, you just start to go like, oh, I'm not doing that to myself. I'm not going to feel guilty because whatever just happened, because I know that's something seated in me that really isn't valuable. It's not helping my child. It isn't helping me. So I think it's so important to look at mom guilt and reframe that a little bit so that we're not in that kind of push it away, I can't feel guilty, but instead just kind of going like, okay, I do really feel this way right now. And what's sort of underneath that. Like, to your point, you were saying some of your have-tos when you were deciding what your schedule should look like is things like, I want to be there for pickup. I want to go to the soccer practices. I want to be there, I want to be the room mom and all these things. So when I was doing all of those things until I went back to graduate school, which my whole kind of schedule changed really quickly and it became way more demanding and I needed to lean on so much more support. And my in-laws started to take my kids to and from school. And at first that guilt kind of ate me up and I was like, oh my gosh, and it's not me and whatever. And again, I sat with it and I looked at it. And then I started to realize, exactly like you said, they made so many great memories getting picked up by their grandparents. They would sometimes go have something delicious to eat after, or they just had their own routines that they started to do. And it was a really great experience. And had I allowed that mom guilt to steer the ship, I would have prevented that, right? So anytime we're sort of in that space, there's always somewhere we have to lean and look at what is the limitation that's holding us back right now? Like, where is it that we're stuck? Yeah. So I love that you kind of cited all those things too.
Yeah, you taught me that. I mean, to be honest, I remember having a conversation with you early on. And I think because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, this assumption of like, and I have a wonderful relationship with her and I freaking love her. So it's like, she's my, pillar of like what it is to be a good mom,
that's how
right?
I am.
Like,
yeah.
So she stayed home. Every costume was homemade. Every meal was homemade. She's like an incredible, she was a stay-at-home mom. That was her job and she did it well, right? So it's like, that's my idea or my ideal of what a good mom is, right? So when now I'm working and doing something I love and I have this relationship with my husband and all these other things that I care about, right? And I'm not making the homemade costume. I'm not doing the homemade cookies and all of that. Like, it's immediate mom guilt. It's immediate, like, I'm not doing it right. I'm not, and I remember we were kind of talking, having this conversation over Voxer. And had come to my house for a retreat, and you had got to meet McKenna, which was so fun,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And
Yeah. And
my
Danny.
yeah, and Danny, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my assumption was like McKenna comes home every day from school. I pick her up and I'm with her and we're doing something together and we're crafting together and we're doing all these things. And McKenna is an incredibly outgoing little munchkin. Like she's so outgoing. She's so inquisitive. She's so curious. And I remember like feeling like, man, like, God, it'd be so cool if just like 1 or 2 days a week she could, you know, like she had something else to do and I could work on this other project. But like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to hold that back from her. But what I noticed started happening, she's come home from school and she'd be like, Mom, 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 let's do this, let's do that. And she constantly wanted, like, I was working with her, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And when you had met her, I remember you just being like, you know, she may be the kind of kid that really loves other activities. Like she
Yeah.
might actually love daycare for a day or two. She might actually love going to art for a few hours or doing something else. Like, and it was like having that experience. And like my point of this is if you can see the way other people are living and doing it well, if you can expand your horizons to say, how are other people being incredible moms and partners and women and contributors to society and not doing it the way that I saw, the way that I assume is right? Are they doing it and raising these great humans? Like having that experience and seeing other ways to do it and being open to that and just like challenging yourself and being like, could you test that out? Could you see how that feels? Like try that on. That for me was, I can't even tell you, such a breath of fresh air to have someone like you, a parenting expert, kind of come to me and be like, you know, you could try a few other ways here. And now
Yeah.
we do. We have her in art for a few hours after school and these other things. And like, I look forward to those days just to have a little time to myself. And then when I pick her up, I'm like 10 times of a better mom because I just had a few extra hours to myself. She just got super ingrained in art for a few extra hours. And then it's just like her and I hanging out afterwards. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like who
Yeah.
would have known? I never would have assumed that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think one of your first questions to me was like, what is the correct amount of time I'm supposed to be spending every day so that I know I'm like, and it's again that like good mom checklist, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's like every day that's going to look really different, right? And every season of life that's going to be very different. You're starting to get a glimpse of that now as McKenna gets older and more independent, but that will keep changing. And then all of a sudden you'll go, my gosh, like I've got to be the one to carve out time for them. Like they're doing their own
Yeah.
thing and so it shifts, it changes, and it's all kind of there to, enjoy each moment. I always tell parents their parenting is really a series of transient phases. They're as terrible as it might feel in 1 minute. They come and they go. You're never there for too long. And so, I always say even if you don't love a certain phase, just own that you don't love it. That's okay, right? Because it'll pass. It'll pass. And
Yeah.
then, you get to kind of find the good parts of each phase, and there's challenges in each phase, and you go easy on yourself, I think, is the most important part. So before I let you go, I wanted to let people know, A, where they could find you, and B, like what's next. I'm so curious to know, where do you think you'll kind of like, what would you love to see for yourself in the next 5 years?
I love that. Well, yes, if anybody wants to come say hello, they can come say hello at kelseymurphy.com, just at my website, or come say hello on Instagram. Like, yeah, if you've listened to me from this and you're part of Albiona's crew, then come say hi to me on Instagram and jump into my DMs, and would love to meet you and connect. Yeah, and it's a good question of what I would want to see in the next 5 years. So, I mean, the program you started with me, the Coaches Mastermind, is kind of my favorite it's my
So
baby,
good.
like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I love that program. So I think that I'm really leaning into that hard, like loving up on that program right now. The Coaches Mastermind is like it's got a little special spot in my heart, so I'm giving it some extra attention and some extra time right now. So I think in the next year or two, we'll probably see that on a bigger platform, like in a bigger
Yay.
way. I think more people will be joining that. I have so many people like Kathy Heller and other people that want to now affiliate for that, want to bring their community into that. So
Oh,
that'll be really
great.
interesting to watch that grow and see, from like a personal, but it's funny when you ask that, like, what do you want? What do you see in like the next 5 years? Like, it's like, I won't even go to business brain always is going like personally, like
Yeah.
what that looks like. And like, I just feel like we're about to step into like a new season, like of Colin and I, like we've really been in the trenches of like young kids and physically being there for our kids, which is like, I'm a baby person, so I really have loved a lot of it. Like
Hmm.
I really, from the second they come out, like month one, I'm like in it, like, oh
Hmm.
my god, so happy, right? And so, but we've been, like you're hunkered down physically and emotionally. I mean, like I'm breastfeeding all the time. Like they
Hmm.
really have you physically, and,
Yes.
Kira just turned 1. We just stopped breastfeeding and they're all starting to become more independent. And so with that comes this new wave of what do you want to do? Like it's almost like a new season, and Colin and I are really like dreaming of things again. We're dreaming
Yeah.
of physical places that we can go and new dreams that we can do with the more time that we have. So we've got a lot of big trips where we want to take the girls. I'm like, planning summers off at places. I want to take the girls to Europe for a full 2 months, and like
Mm.
little things like that that you can start to do when they become a little bit more independent. So that's like what I'm super excited about for the next 5 years. And I'm so grateful I've built the business already to a place where it can accommodate those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
I don't know that I've spent enough time really celebrating and loving that because I've just been in it, right? We've been just in
Yeah.
the trenches. So now I think it's going to be a little bit of like, let's lean into the one program that's kind of your baby here, into the coach's mastermind, and then like do some more adventures with like your kids. Like I'm really
Uh,
excited for that.
I love that. That's so good. And you deserve all of it. So, well, thank you so much for being here. I love you to pieces. For anybody who wants to find Kelsey, all the links will be in the show notes. I definitely highly recommend if you're even thinking about something, just reach out to her. She is always the right person to turn to and has been for me. So, thank you so much, Kelsey.
Oh, thanks for having me on. This was amazing.